She meant to text her ex, the father who abandoned them. Instead, her baby's photo landed in the hands of a billionaire tech CEO. When Rose, a desperate single mother, sends a heartbreaking message pleading for help with her son's life-saving surgery, she doesn't realize she's contacted a stranger. But when Ethan Maddox, a powerful and guarded entrepreneur, reads the plea and sees the fragile baby boy in the photo, something inside him shifts. He could have ignored it, but he didn't. He showed up. What begins as a mistake turns into a miracle, one that just might heal them all. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The fluorescent lights in the pediatric ICU flickered faintly, casting a sterile glow over the small hospital room. Rose, pale and worn, sat perched on the edge of a stiff vinyl chair next to the crib where her 6-month-old son, Aiden, lay hooked to a series of monitors. The soft beeping of machines was the only sound besides the occasional hum of passing nurses. His tiny chest rose and fell with effort, his breath shallow but determined, as if even at his age he understood what it meant to fight. Rose hadn't slept in 2 days. Her clothes hung loose on her slender frame, her eyes sunken, and her long hair was tied into a knot that had lost its shape sometime yesterday. Still, she couldn't leave his side, not for food, not for a moment of peace. Every second away felt like betrayal. Earlier that week, the doctors had given her the news she'd dreaded since his diagnosis. Aiden needed emergency heart surgery. His congenital heart defect had worsened, and there was no longer time to delay. The operation was his best chance, possibly his only one. But the cost? $140,000. Rose didn't even have $4. She had sold everything worth selling, her car, her furniture, even her laptop. Friends had chipped in what they could. A small GoFundMe had stalled at $6,000. She had applied for charity aid through the hospital, but the list was long, the red tape thicker than she had the time to cut through. She'd begged, pleaded, gone to churches and charities with tears in her eyes. Nothing was enough. Only one name remained, the one she had avoided. Derek, Aiden's father, her ex-fiancé, a successful investment broker in Chicago, living in a world far removed from hers now. He had vanished the moment she told him she was pregnant. No calls, no replies, not even a text. It was as if he'd erased her from his life like a typo. Still, tonight, as the machines beeped in steady rhythm and her son gripped her finger in his sleep, she knew she had to try one last time. She unlocked her phone, her thumb hovering over his contact, still saved, still there after all this time. A few more seconds passed as she stared at the name, her jaw tight with bitterness and shame. Finally, she opened a message and began to type. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. I know you don't want to hear from me, but this is your son. His name is Aiden. He's 6 months old and in the hospital. He needs heart surgery, and we can't afford it. I'm not asking you for anything beyond what a father should give. Please help us. He doesn't have time. She hesitated. Would he even read it? She looked over at Aiden. His small hand twitched slightly, his cheeks flushed under the oxygen cannula. He deserved everything, even if it meant swallowing every last piece of her pride. She scrolled through her contact list again, quickly found Derek's number, and tapped send photo. The most recent one. Aiden wrapped in his hospital blanket, looking up at her with those soft, searching eyes. She hit send, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. Seconds passed. Nothing. She set the phone face down and tried not to hope. Hope hurt more than anything. But what she didn't realize, what she would not find out until much later, was that in her exhaustion, her blurred eyes had tapped the wrong name in her contacts list. The message meant for Derek had gone elsewhere, to a man she had never met, a stranger whose life was about to collide with hers in a way neither of them could have foreseen. And Aiden, with his fragile heart and unknowable future, was at the center of it all. Then Maddox had just closed his laptop when the text buzzed through his phone. It was past 9 p.m., and the Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass windows of his penthouse office. Most of the city was winding down, but Ethan's days rarely ended before midnight. As the founder and CEO of Novalink Technologies, time never truly belonged to him. Still, something about the message made him glance at the screen immediately. Unknown number. The preview read, "I know you don't want to hear from me, but this is your son." Ethan frowned. His first thought, a scam. But something made him open the message anyway. He read the entire thing. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but this is your son. His name is Aiden. He's 6 months old and in the hospital. He needs heart surgery, and we can't afford it. I'm not asking you for anything beyond what a father should give. Please help us. He doesn't have time." Below it was the photo. A baby, maybe 6 months old, just as the message said. Pale, with wide, dark eyes and tiny fingers wrapped around a plush toy. The tubes, the oxygen line, the hospital blanket. The look in the child's eyes wasn't fear. It was trust. Ethan blinked. For a long, still moment, he just stood there, phone in hand. Something twisted in his chest. Unfamiliar, uncomfortable, almost protective. The baby in that photo didn't look like someone's mistake or someone's problem. He looked like someone who needed to be fought for. Ethan had no children. No ex-girlfriends who'd vanished with a baby in tow. He lived a life of precision and order, marked by success, solitude, and the tight control of a man who had built everything from nothing. But this message, it cut through all of that like a hot knife through steel. He reread the message 3 more times. It wasn't meant for him. That much was clear. But he couldn't shake it. He found himself texting back before he could talk himself out of it. "I think you sent this to the wrong person. But what hospital is he at?" He paced the length of his glass-walled office, phone clutched tight in his hand, waiting. Waiting. There were 12 things he needed to do before the next board meeting, but none of them mattered right now. Then her reply came. St. Jude Memorial. PICU 3rd floor. That was it. No explanation. No correction. No question about who he was. Just trust, quick, silent trust that he might be the one she meant to reach. Ethan's pulse quickened. He grabbed his coat from the back of his office chair. Told his assistant to cancel the evening's call. He didn't say why. He couldn't. As he descended the elevator into the night, he typed one more message. "I'm on my way." The drive took 15 minutes. He barely remembered any of it. His car, a sleek black Tesla, glided through the city streets like a ghost, but his mind was already 3 steps ahead. What if it was real? What if there was truly a woman, alone in a hospital room, trying to save her son? What kind of man would ignore that, even if the message wasn't meant for him? When Ethan arrived at St. Jude Memorial, the scent of antiseptic and cold air hit him the moment he walked through the automatic doors. He approached the front desk, all expensive coat and polished shoes, but his voice was low and unassuming. "I'm looking for a baby. Aiden. 6 months old. He's in the PICU." The nurse behind the desk blinked. "Are you family?" Ethan paused. I got a message. I don't know if I'm family, but I was asked to come." Something in his voice must have rung true, because she hesitated only a moment before she said, "Room 312. 3rd floor." He nodded once. "Thank you." As he took the elevator up, he felt the strange weight of uncertainty tightening around his chest. He didn't know what he would find, or what he would say, only that something, some invisible thread, was pulling him forward. He reached the 3rd floor, walked slowly down the corridor of quiet rooms and nurses in blue scrubs. When he found room 312, he stopped. The door had a small window. Through the glass, he saw her. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, sitting beside a crib. Her back was slightly hunched, one hand wrapped around the rails, the other gently stroking the baby's arm. Her hair was loose around her face, her clothes wrinkled, her posture tense with exhaustion. The baby was asleep. Tubes. Monitors. A soft beeping filled the room. Ethan stared for a long moment, his heart thudding in his chest. He raised his hand and knocked gently on the glass. The woman turned. Confusion swept across her face as she stood, blinking, trying to place him. He opened the door slowly. "Hi," he said quietly, stepping in. "I got your message." Rose blinked in disbelief. The man standing in the doorway didn't look like anyone she knew. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored navy coat with the collar still turned up from the night air. His dark hair was windswept, and his face bore the unmistakable marks of surprise and concern, but not confusion. Not like someone who had wandered into the wrong hospital room. Still, she instinctively took a step forward, placing herself slightly in front of Aiden's crib. I think there's been a mistake," she said, trying to keep her voice even. The man gave a small, apologetic smile. "Probably. You sent me a message by mistake. About your son." Rose's breath caught. The text. Her eyes widened, and she reached quickly for her phone on the small table next to the crib. She opened the message thread and felt a hot wave of embarrassment sweep over her skin like fire. She had sent it to the wrong number. Oh God. The photo. The message. The desperation. Oh no, she breathed, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this. I must have tapped the wrong contact. He raised his hand gently, his expression calm. "It's okay. Really." Rose looked at him, not sure what to say. There was no pity in his eyes, only a deep, quiet intensity. Like someone who had already made a decision before stepping through the door. "I read the message," he said softly. "I saw the photo, and I couldn't just scroll past it like it was nothing." "You didn't have to come," she murmured, still not believing he was real. "You don't even know us." "I know that a baby needs surgery," he replied. "That's enough." Rose was too tired to cry, but her throat tightened. Aiden stirred slightly in his crib, letting out a soft whimper. She turned to check him, gently smoothing his blanket, her fingers trembling now. Not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Hope. The man stepped forward cautiously, his eyes fixed on the sleeping infant. "He's beautiful," he said. Rose smiled faintly. "He's strong. Stronger than I ever imagined a baby could be." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of machines and the occasional hallway footstep filling the room. "Do you mind if I ask what the doctors said?" he asked carefully. She hesitated. Then she looked up at him, saw no judgment, just sincere curiosity, and nodded. "He has a congenital heart defect. It wasn't obvious when he was born, but it started showing at 4 months. Feeding became hard. He got tired too fast. We went from one clinic to another until someone finally told me what it was. He needs open heart surgery. Soon. And insurance?" She shook her head. "I was working part-time when I was pregnant. Lost that when I went on bed rest. Medicaid helps, but not with everything. The surgery's out of network. I've been trying to get help, but everything moves so slow. And he doesn't have time to wait." He glanced at Aiden again, something tightening in his jaw. "What's the name of the surgeon you're waiting on?" he asked. "Dr. Sue. She's supposed to be the best. But she's in private practice, no hospital connection to us. I've tried calling. There's a wait list. Paperwork. A deposit." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Rose asked. "Calling someone," he replied, already scrolling through contacts. In minutes, he was speaking with a hospital liaison. His tone was direct, clipped, but respectful. Names were exchanged. Credentials. He mentioned something about a donation fund. A medical trust. Rose stood frozen as she listened to this stranger. This man she didn't know, move heaven and earth on behalf of her son. Not for praise. Not for show. Simply because he could. After a moment, he hung up and looked at her. "I've arranged for a transfer. Aiden will be moved to St. James Pediatric Heart Center by tomorrow morning. I've contacted Dr. Sue's team. They're clearing a spot for him. You won't need to worry about the cost. I'll take care of it." Rose stared at him, the words washing over her like foreign language. What do you mean you'll take care of it?" "I mean exactly that." His voice was calm. Firm. "It's handled." Her knees gave slightly. She reached for the side of the crib to steady herself. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." He stepped a little closer, but not too close, like he understood the fragility of this moment. Because someone sent me a message asking for help, and I realized I was in a position to give it. I don't know why it landed on my phone instead of the man it was meant for. But I'm here, and I'm not walking away. Rose pressed a hand to her lips. I don't even know your name. He gave a soft, wry smile. Ethan. Ethan Maddox. Her eyes widened slightly. She recognized the name. Everyone in tech did. But tonight, he wasn't a headline or a magazine cover. He was just a man who had answered a call that wasn't meant for him. A man who chose to show up anyway. She looked at her son, sleeping more peacefully than he had in days, and then back at Ethan. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone anymore. The air in the new hospital felt different. Warmer somehow, less sterile, though Rose knew that was probably just her own mind breathing for the first time in weeks. St. James Pediatric Heart Center had private rooms, sunlight filtering through large windows, and nurses who spoke in soft, confident tones. There were murals painted on the walls, clouds, jungle animals, starry skies, all designed to make frightened little ones feel less like patients and more like children again. Aiden's crib now stood in a room with real curtains, not thin vinyl dividers. Rose had her own fold-out bed, and warm meals were brought to her without her needing to ask. She had never imagined what a hospital could be like when you weren't fighting for every inch. Ethan had made it happen, and he kept showing up, every single day. At first, Rose thought he would stop coming. Once the surgery was scheduled, once the payments were made, once his initial guilt or curiosity wore off. But he didn't. Each morning, just after 9, Ethan would walk through the door with coffee in one hand and something thoughtful in the other. A book, a warm muffin, a toy for Aiden. He never came empty-handed. But it wasn't the gifts that mattered. It was his presence. He asked questions, sat by the crib, watched Aiden's monitors like he understood every number. He never spoke down to Rose or treated her like charity. He never hovered like he was owed anything. He simply was there. Rose wasn't used to that. The nights were hardest. When Aiden was sleeping and the monitors dimmed and the world outside the window felt far away, Rose would lie awake on the cot, her body aching with exhaustion, her heart conflicted. She had built high walls since Derek left. Walls lined with hurt and held together by survival. No one had breached them in over a year. But Ethan didn't try to knock them down. He simply sat outside them, waiting. One afternoon, a week before Aiden's surgery, the rain was drizzling softly against the window. Ethan had arrived with a paper bag of pastries from a French bakery downtown and placed it on the side table. Rose was brushing Aiden's soft hair with her fingers when she finally said it. "Why are you still here?" Ethan looked up from where he was seated, his coat folded neatly over the back of the visitor chair. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him fully. "You've already done more than anyone has in my entire life. You got him into this hospital. You paid for everything. You're still showing up. Every single day. Why?" Ethan didn't respond immediately. He looked over at Aiden, then back at her. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she expected. "I lost someone once," he said. "Not a child, but someone I loved. It happened fast. Aneurysm. 1 minute she was fine, the next she was gone. I had all the money in the world, and it didn't matter. I couldn't stop it." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Ever since then, I've worked nonstop. Built this empire. Filled every hour of every day with noise and control. And then your message landed in my inbox." He met her eyes. "I can't explain it, Rose. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't pity. It was like, for the first time in years, I had the chance to do something that mattered. Not a donation. Not a tax write-off. Just this. Being here." Rose looked at him, stunned. She hadn't expected such honesty. Certainly not from a man like him. She nodded slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You make it feel okay to need someone." Ethan smiled gently. "Maybe because I need this too." That evening, Rose let herself laugh. Not politely. Not guardedly. She laughed when Ethan tried to mimic the cartoon Aiden liked. doing silly voices that cracked halfway through. She laughed until tears ran down her face, not because it was that funny, but because it felt so good to feel light again. Ethan laughed too, not just at himself, but at her joy. Later that night, as Aiden slept, Rose found herself sitting closer to Ethan on the cot. The silence between them was no longer heavy or awkward. It was comfortable. She glanced at him, then down at the baby. He's going to grow up not knowing how close he came to. Her voice trailed off. Ethan didn't let her finish. He reached over, gently resting a hand on hers. But he won't have to, he said. He's going to grow up knowing he was loved. That's what matters. And in that moment, with the rain tapping gently on the glass and Aiden breathing softly beside them, Rose realized something terrifying and beautiful. The walls she had built, they were already starting to fall. The morning after Aiden's surgery, the sky was crisp and blue, a rare clarity in the city's usual haze. The surgery had lasted nearly 4 hours. Rose hadn't sat down once. Her hands had trembled, her stomach clenched into knots. But when Dr. Sue came out with her calm, confident smile and the words, "It went beautifully. He's going to be okay," Rose had collapsed into a chair and wept. Now Aiden lay in recovery, tucked beneath soft hospital blankets, his tiny chest rising steadily. He had tubes and monitors still, but his color was better. There was warmth in his cheeks that hadn't been there in weeks. Ethan had been there the entire time. He hadn't spoken much that day, just stayed with her, offering his quiet, unwavering presence. He brought her water, held her hand, stood up to hug her when she couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't the grand gesture that mattered, it was the steadiness. The way he anchored her when everything else felt like waves. It was the first time Rose realized she no longer thought of him as a stranger. She trusted him. More than that, she needed him. And that terrified her. The next day, while Aiden slept and the machines beeped in calm rhythm, Rose sat by the window reading. Ethan had just stepped out to take a call when she heard a knock on the hospital room door. She looked up, expecting a nurse. But it wasn't. Her breath caught in her throat. There, in the doorway, stood Derek. Her ex. Aiden's biological father. He looked just as she remembered, tall, sharp-featured, perfectly styled. He wore an expensive wool coat and carried himself like a man who believed the world owed him something. His eyes flicked around the room, landing on Aiden, then back to Rose with a disbelieving look. "Is that him?" he asked, stepping in like he had a right to be there. Rose stood up instinctively, placing herself between the crib and the man who had once promised to love her. "What are you doing here?" He smirked faintly, like this was an inconvenience. "You sent me a text. The one about the baby needing surgery. I sent that weeks ago, Derek. You ignored it." "I was busy," he said with a shrug. "Work's been crazy. I didn't even see it until this morning." Rose folded her arms. "And you thought now was a good time to stroll in? I figured I should at least come see for myself. Make sure you're not exaggerating." His eyes roamed around the pristine hospital room, lingering on the equipment. "Looks like you're doing pretty well. Fancy place. Private room." Rose's jaw tightened. "I didn't pay for this." "Oh," he raised an eyebrow. "So what?" GoFundMe exploded overnight. Before she could answer, Ethan walked back into the room. He stopped short when he saw the man standing across from Rose. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice neutral, though the undercurrent of protectiveness was unmistakable. Derek turned, sizing Ethan up. His eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. "Let me guess. The new boyfriend." His tone was sharp with derision. Ethan didn't rise to it. He simply extended his hand. "Ethan Maddox." Derek froze. The name registered instantly. The smugness on his face faltered. "Maddox? The Ethan Maddox?" Ethan nodded once. "The same." Rose said nothing. She watched Derek process it, saw the flicker of greed, envy, and bruised ego pass over his features like fast-moving shadows. "So," Derek said, voice laced with cynicism, "that's how you got in here. Makes sense. You trade one guy who walked away for another guy with a savior complex." Rose's hands clenched at her sides. But Ethan's voice remained calm, unshaken. I don't have a complex, he said. I just do what a decent man would do if he saw a mother begging for help and a child who needed saving. Derek chuckled. And what? You think that makes you the father now? Ethan didn't flinch. But Rose stepped in, voice low and firm. No, but you certainly aren't. Derek blinked, stunned. I gave you every chance, she continued, her voice rising. I called. I texted. I begged. Not for me, for him. And you ignored us. Derek started to speak, but she cut him off. And now that it's convenient for you, now that someone else cleaned up the mess, you want to swoop in like you care? You don't get to do that. Silence filled the room. Aiden stirred softly behind them. Rose turned to Ethan. Can you give us a moment? He hesitated, then nodded. I'll be right outside. The moment the door closed, Rose turned back to Derek. I don't want your help. I don't want your money. And I sure as hell don't want your presence around my son. He stared at her, blinking. You're serious? I'm done letting you rewrite this story just because you don't like the part you played. You made your choice. And I made mine. She walked to the door and opened it. You can go now. Derek looked at her, for a second like he might argue. But something about her expression, firm, final, stopped him. He glanced once at Aiden, then walked out without another word. When the door clicked shut behind him, Rose felt the air shift. Ethan stepped back and slowly, studying her face. You okay? She nodded. Her voice was soft but sure. I think I am now. Ethan gave a small smile. You didn't need me to fight your battles. No, she agreed. But it feels good knowing someone would. She crossed the room, stood beside him, and looked into his eyes. I want you here, she said quietly. Not because I need saving, but because when I look at you, I feel safe. I feel seen. He reached out, brushing her hair behind her ear. I'm not going anywhere, he said. And she believed him. The world had changed. 3 months after Aiden's surgery, spring arrived in the city. Not with fanfare, but in subtle moments. The return of birdsong in the early morning, buds forming on the trees outside Rose's apartment window, and sunlight that felt warm rather than indifferent. Aiden was thriving. He had gained weight, his cheeks were full and rosy, his laugh contagious. He'd learned to sit up, babble with authority, and grin with 2 tiny teeth that had just broken through. Every new thing he did felt like a miracle Rose hadn't dared hope for in those dark hospital days. And through it all, Ethan had never left. Not once. He wasn't just around. He had become part of them. He joined them for morning walks in the park. Held Aiden when he cried. Showed up with groceries and small surprises. On rainy nights, he would sit cross-legged on Rose's floor, talking quietly while Aiden slept in the other room. Sometimes they spoke about childhood, or work, or the future. Sometimes they just sat in silence, comfortable, content. Rose had resisted at first, resisted the idea of needing anyone, of depending on someone who could so easily walk away. But Ethan wasn't like Derek. He didn't vanish. He didn't make promises and then disappear. He earned his place. Not with money. Not with grand gestures. With consistency. Kindness. Time. The morning of Aiden's first birthday dawned bright and golden. The party was simple, just the way Rose wanted it. A picnic in the park, under a giant oak tree near the playground. A small group of close friends from the hospital, her neighbor Maya, a nurse who had cared for Aiden during recovery. There were blue and white balloons tied to the branches, picnic blankets spread out across the grass, and a homemade cake with little clouds piped in icing. Rose held Aiden in her arms as guests arrived. He wore a little denim jacket and a paper crown that he kept trying to pull off. She laughed each time, smoothing it back onto his head. And then Ethan arrived. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, sleeves pushed up, a small box tucked under one arm, and something bright in his eyes. He greeted the guests warmly, kissed Aiden's forehead, and wrapped an arm around Rose's waist as naturally as if he'd always belonged there. The group sang Happy Birthday, voices rising in imperfect harmony. Rose helped Aiden blow out the candle, a single soft flame that flickered before disappearing. Everyone clapped. Ethan handed Rose the small box. Not for him, he said. For you. She gave him a curious look but took it, sliding the ribbon off gently. Inside was a key. A single silver key on a velvet cushion. Her breath hitched. I don't understand. It's for your new place, Ethan said, his voice low. Bigger. 2 bedrooms. Closer to the hospital. Safer neighborhood. I had it set up in your name. Rose stared at him. You did all that? I didn't want to assume, he said quickly. I know how important your independence is. But I wanted you to know it's there. For you. For Aiden. No strings. Rose blinked away tears. You are impossible. He grinned. Is that a compliment? But before she could answer, he reached into his jacket pocket again and pulled out something else, a small velvet ring box. The chatter around them faded. Time seemed to pause. Rose's hands flew to her mouth as he slowly sank down to one knee, the grass crunching beneath him. I didn't expect a wrong number to change my life, he said. But it did. She let out a small laugh, breathless. I didn't expect a woman I'd never met to teach me what it meant to love without condition. Or a child I didn't help create to show me how fiercely I could want to protect someone. He opened the box. A simple, elegant ring sparkled inside. But most of all, I didn't expect you. Rose, I love you. I love Aiden like he's my own. And if you'll let me, I want to build a family with both of you. Will you marry me? Rose was already crying. Not with fear. Not with sadness. With something deeper. Something that came from a place long buried and now finally free. She knelt down with him, Aiden squirming happily between them, and wrapped her arms around both. Yes, she whispered into his shoulder. Yes, Ethan. Yes to everything. Cheers erupted around them. Maya clapped the loudest. Aiden squealed in delight, entirely unaware of the life-altering moment he had just witnessed. But it was enough. It was everything. Later that evening, as the sun set over the skyline and the last guests filtered away, Rose sat on the picnic blanket with Aiden in her lap and Ethan's arms around them both. A year ago, she had felt utterly alone. Now, she had love. She had laughter. She had home. And all because a desperate message, meant for the wrong man, had found the right one instead. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.